Welcome to the creative community. I'm your host, David Starkey, and my guest this time is musician, composer, songwriter, teacher, videographer, Ollie Powers. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you on the show, Ollie. Today we're going to look at a couple of your videos, and we're going to hear you play this theremin, this instrument. People know it, they love it. It's a very strange sounding thing. We have it on a prop. You're not actually going to play it while we're talking, though, right now.
You'll see it again in the videos.
Yeah. So I'm always curious about how people got their start. Tell me, you're a local guy from Ventura.
Ventura.
Here. How did you, in 100 words or less, get from birth to where we're sitting right now?
Well, I got to credit my parents, of course, but two different reasons. My mom, when I was a really small kid, I'd walk up to pianos. I was intrigued by them. I'd walk up and tinkle the keys. But she noticed I wasn't just banging randomly. I was finding tunes. And she said, "Get this. We've got a piano. Get him piano lessons." Right. So I was on piano lessons by the time I was 6.
Okay.
That's my mom's contribution. My dad took a music appreciation course in college, and just was blown away by all the music he never heard of, and became a big record collector. Mm-hmm. And we had a big stereo, giant speakers in the living room, and I go in there, I never knew what I was going to hear. I might walk in and hear Gregorian chant. And the next day I might walk in and hear Igor Stravinsky, or Miles Davis.
Right.
So he's
very eclectic.
Very eclectic, and that all went into my brain. I was actually listening to modern stuff before I discovered the Beatles. Okay. I mean, I knew they were out there, but Sgt. Pepper's came out. But I was listening to Karl-Heinz Stockhausen before Sgt. Pepper's came out.
Yeah, well, they were probably listening to it too at some point.
Yeah, he's on the cover.
That's right.
One of the little faces.
So you were listening, and then did you play in bands, or did you go off and, I know you got a PhD from Ball State in writing a music dissertation.
I actually wanted to compose electronic music. Okay. That was the thing that intrigued me the most. And you may know there's a movie called Forbidden Planet that the soundtrack is entirely electronic, and that was running on television when I was a kid. Okay. And then Stockhausen became known for his electronic pieces, and Edgar Varese was another one. My dad had there was an album by Columbia that came out in 1961 with music of Edgar Varese. Very striking music, most of it written in the 20s, but the last track was this electronic piece. Right. And it had all kinds of sounds in it, and I just loved that. And it intrigued my mind. Other kids were watching westerns, and I was watching science fiction.
That,
and so I took electronics in high school as part of that, and then I took German in college because of that, just get myself closer to the sources. And I went to UC San Diego, got my bachelor's, and that's where I got my hands on some synthesizers. They were just available. Later on, I started teaching at Ventura College, and I was teaching technology. I also became very adept with tape recorders and mixers and all that stuff. So there was a teacher there who was doing it, and I guess he left, and they knew me at Ventura College because I've impressed them with. They knew I was a nut for all that stuff, so they hired me there to teach. That was my first class, was teaching tape recording basics and synthesizer basics.
Well, you mentioned to me before the camera started rolling that your dissertation focuses on music from 1948 to 1968, before synthesizers, as we now know them, really existed. So how did people make all those crazy sounds?
That's the era of electronic music they sometimes call the era of the classical studio technique. And there were instruments you could play, but these composers weren't interested in that so much as the control you got by recording every single sound. You could set oscillators and equipment to make this whatever sound you wanted, record it on tape, splice the tape together
You
to
literally were doing
literally splicing
right.
tape. I mean, hours and hours and hours for a few seconds of
Right.
music. People say that's a crazy way to proceed, but I like to liken it to making a stop motion animation movie, which is, it seems like a crazy way to make a movie. You shoot each frame individually, but that's kind of what they were doing. They were making each sound
well, and
by
it's
hand.
not that different, although a lot more time consuming than we're working on Logic Pro, for instance, and we're cutting little tiny little snippets of sound and moving that around in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
So you were teaching there, but tell me a little bit about how you got involved in the theremin. How was that?
Oh, well, I knew about the theremin. I don't remember when I first knew of it, but when I was in high school, there was a little company from Texas that made a theremin kit. And it was only about this
Make
big.
your own theremin.
Yeah, well, yeah, they could provide all the parts and you just and the board, you just put it together. And so I convinced my electronics teacher in high school to let me make that a project. And so at the end of high school, I had a theremin, and I started trying to make electronic music with that, but then moved on.
Right. Well, let's going to pause for a second. We're going to take a look at you doing that in this very studio just a few minutes ago. So let's take a quick cut at that. Wow, that's wild.
Thank you very much. I hope you didn't mind the out of tune notes.
Well, it's an imprecise instrument to play, kind of.
It really is. We have this in front of us. Probably from looking at it, you could see what I was doing. But basically, there's an antenna for volume and an antenna for pitch.
Right.
And basically, it's a proximity detector, basically, but made musical. And so there's nothing to touch. The notes are just somewhere out here. And even if you had it, you knew where exactly where they were. The circuits drift after a while, so they might not be the exact same spot. So you just always have to go by relative pitch and listening to where you are. And that's why theremin players usually glide between the notes, because they're trying to make sure they don't overshoot.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, another thing that you've done is we're going to reveal your secret identity, Dr. Theorem. Yes, and we want to look at a couple of videos of you working on this. So the first one we're going to look at is Spock's Brain, and you told me that took you almost a year to make?
Each of the videos takes a long time because I kind of work by
myself. You're everything.
Yeah.
So what's involved in making a video like Spock's Brain?
Well, first of all, the song comes from the 80s. And I did have a band in the 80s. Back then, we called it Boy Genius.
Right.
Since that time, there have been actually other bands called Boy Genius.
There's even an album called Boy Genius.
And the Boy Genius animated show. So it was getting too crowded there, so I decided to rename it. And I did a big search on the web. What's a name no one is using?
Right.
And Dr. Theorem.
Right.
Of all I had a whole page list. Finally, that came up as no one's using that.
Right.
So that's how it became.
So you're kind of like a mad scientist of new wave.
That was it. I liked new wave music, new wave rock back in the 80s, and I always kind of had a sympathy for mad scientists. So it was a mad scientist rock and roll or science fiction rock. So that's the idea. So now it's a virtual band. So
you play all the instruments.
Yeah, but the recording that this is based on was from the band. So they actually have drummer and bass player from the original band playing. But you see me playing everything because I couldn't bear to ask them to come and play. It's all the time it takes to make these videos.
Right.
So I didn't want to put that on anyone else's shoulders besides mine.
All right, well, viewers have probably been saying, well, stop talking, I want to watch Spock's brain. So, viewers, here we go. Here's Spock's brain. So if you want to watch this video again, YouTube is the place to go.
It's on YouTube.
You have your own channel?
I believe so.
You don't post very often.
I guess I do. If everyone just was to type DR theorem,
right,
little dash, and one of the titles, they probably go straight to my videos.
Okay, yeah. Well, there's Spock's Brain, and then there's the next one that you did. It was called Television.
Television.
And you know, I'm curious because I'm also a musician, and I always weighing how much time I want to put into something versus, you know, who's going to see it, right? Because you want to perform for people, and you have views of for your thing, but are you ever thinking, boy, this is a lot of work versus the amount of feedback I'm going to get, or do you ultimately think this is for me? I'm doing that for me.
You always, I think all composers and songwriters have to do it for themselves, and then the rest of it is, you know, the hard work of promoting it. And that's where I really fall down. Playing this in the original '80s, playing in the band, that's how I felt. We're putting it out there, and I wasn't getting much response. Of course, you know, bands play for years to build up their fan base, and just wasn't happening. So I put that aside. So now it's a virtual band.
Right. So now you've got remote controls, and you're starting and stopping the video. And
exactly. A little control for the camera, and a little control to start the CD player. Then I'm obviously miming the original recording.
Right. And then Final Cut Pro, is that your?
Final Cut Pro, which is so cool, because it solved all the problems. In Spock's Brain, I wanted to. That's place where I'm rotating in space, playing guitar solo.
Right.
Like, I was thinking, how am I going to do that? Am I going to sit sideways on a stool, and put the camera up there, and kick myself around? And how am I going to? And
you realize you just to push the button away.
You just program. It's called keyframe animation, and you tell it to rotate, and it rotates. Right. And so you can zoom an image, rotate an image. It's a dream. I do a lot of green screen stuff, so I can isolate. I can basically put me in front of anything, anything in front of anything else.
And you had worked in television before for many years, so it's not like this is just a fresh, you know.
That's right. That's right. I did. There is an older video for television, but it will not be seen.
Okay, we'll just sort of keep that one up. Well, before we get too far away from that, let's take a look at television by Dr. Theorem.
Thank you very much.
I'm turning the channels, I'm twisting the dial.
I'm back here with Dr. Theorem, aka Ollie Powers.
I'm Dr. Powers.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit about your teaching at Ventura College, but you've been doing this since 1980. That's a long time. I'm curious about how students have changed since 1980 to 2019.
I'm not sure they've changed. They come with different musical interests.
Right.
I used to get a lot of people in bands. You know, they're guitarists and bassists. Now I get more people doing beats at home.
Right.
You know, that's a lot of fun to help them do that.
And because you're familiar with that, you're capable of teaching whatever happens.
I guess I should mention that the music department has noticed that students used to come with a lot of, they play piano from an early age, they'd be really prepared. And now we get students coming in at age 18 who want to start their music careers, and we have to start them with more basics. You know?
Yeah.
That's one change in the students that we've noticed.
Yeah. What are you working on right now?
A new video for another one of the songs from my original repertoire, which his name is just pause tape. I can't know. The name will come to me as I.
Let's pause for just a second. I'm gonna re-ask that question,
Hold on.
or I'll ask you a different question.
Yeah, the song. Oh, Invaders from Earth.
All right. So I'm coming back, and so what are you working on right now?
I'm working on a new video for another one of the songs that was originally done in the 80s, and the title is Invaders from Earth.
Okay.
So I'm having a lot of fun with that one.
What's the theme right now? Just aliens are invading?
Basically, we're invading somewhere else,
okay.
and we're bringing.
We are the invaders.
The lyrics are all the things we're bringing. We're bringing computers, attorneys, and all those little plastic forks and knives.
So, when you're composing, tell me a little bit about that process. I know these are songs from a while ago, but I mean, are you beginning with a melody, with the lyrics, or a concept that you want to kind of meld the two together?
It's kind of more spontaneous than that. If I can start any of those ways. I can start with a line, a lyric line I want to feature somehow. Or more often it happens I'm playing on a guitar or piano, and I've got a chord
just
set that
I
like. I come up with, I like that chord progression, and I'll build everything else into that. I'll think of lyrics to go with it.
Right.
Sometimes it takes a long time, like the song that took me 10 years to finish.
Wow.
Or sometimes it takes 30 minutes.
Sure. Yeah. Well, when you're teaching students, what are you trying to get across to them? What are the most important things that they can learn from you or from really any music department?
Well, when I teach theory, I'm trying to get them to realize that all the technical stuff, like this kind of chord and that kind of chord, is in everything they listen to, practically.
Right.
And I brought an example, just the other day I brought an example from the Beatles to exemplify a secondary dominant and a secondary leading tone chord. Look, they did it right there. George Harrison wrote it right there.
Right. So you want to do some technical skills, basically, for them to go on.
In teaching theory, that's what I'm teaching, but I want the greater thing to come away with is this is music. This is what it's out there, and it's happening all the time.
Right. But it's so difficult, isn't it, for just about anybody to transfer what's in your heart or your brain into something that can connect with other people? Isn't that?
It can be true. So learning music theory or getting used to the process of composing or writing a song even is the practical side of it. And over here we have the emotions, right? And over here we have the finished product. In between, you have to do some work to translate and put stuff together, and you have to be ready to modify and change your mind and work with it, kind of interact with your song or composition.
So you need to be willing to admit you're wrong.
Or just be flexible. And
be flexible.
Better note comes along. Oh,
take that one. Yeah. Well, boy, it's been a lot of fun talking to you. Before we go, I want to go back to your time because you worked with our director, Phil Taggart. What's a favorite memory that you have from days gone by in Ventura television?
Oh gosh, I like the time that Phil took a camera out to the fairgrounds, and just got all kinds of shots of, close-up shots of the Ferris wheels and things. Just lights were going by. And he brought it back to the studio, and I knew that music of Philip Glass would fit with that, so I stuck music from, I think it was Einstein on the Beach, with the images. It just made the coolest video that we showed on our station.
You got a lot of room to experiment back then.
A little bit.
Yeah.
that was a part of our kind of our coverage, really, but we had work to do too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, Ollie Powers, aka Dr. Theorem, so much for being on the Creative Community. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
The Creative Community is produced here in Ventura by Phil Taggart and his fantastic crew. I'm David Starkey, and we'll see you next time.